Hey. Hey, babe. It's been a while. How are you? It's good to see you. Yeah, it's been like 5 months since July, my last video. Bet you didn't think I'd come back. Showed you. It's funny doing these videos because it's like I'm talking to myself and like projecting all my insecurities onto you guys. So yeah, thanks for being here for that. But it's been 5 months since I posted a video. I'm still on week 8, baby. I've been doing week 8. I've done it probably 3 times now. This is just kind of how I'm rolling with this. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna keep doing it. I keep mulling over the lessons. I keep it, maybe not top of mind, I wouldn't say, but I kind of let it fester and brew. And then at some point, I'm like, you know what? I need to get back on this. And then of course, it's when I learn, I have a very major breakthrough / I learn a big lesson that of course happens to relate to the week that I'm reading for. So yeah, excited. I want to move forward. I'm going to be closing this Artist Way out in the next few weeks because I know that, you know, it's not like I'm going to not have any more blockages after I finish this course, but I do recognize that I'll be one step closer to eliminating my blockages so that I can create more fully and intentionally and purposefully. And that's really what I'm looking to bring in to 2026 this year. The end of last year was quite a doozy. I'll give you the TLDR of what's been going on in life since my last video. My last video was in July, around in August, August, September, whatever, finished out the birthday. And some of the big things that happened was at the end of October, I had a friend pass away. And that was really sudden and very upsetting. And then like right after his funeral, Eric and I went to Argentina and Brazil with my parents. And I had the best trip ever. I had a great trip. And in between then, something that I'm not mentioning is that work got really hard. Work got really hard. It got really stressful. It got very tumultuous and difficult. And most importantly, it was becoming more and more unaligned with me. And so, you know, I had this really crazy moment, which I've talked about on my TikTok account, actually. If you're interested, you can follow me there. But I had a really interesting moment when in Rio, sitting on the bay, where I was just really reflective and saying to God, you know, there's literally Christ the Redeemer in the mountains. Everywhere you look, he's like basking you, like protecting you. And I just had this moment where I said, I am ready for what's next. I know that there's something out there for me. And I know, to God, to the universe, to whatever you want to call it, I believe it's all the same thing. But whatever you feel comfortable calling it, that higher power, I feel like there is a greater purpose for me. And I ask God, if this, me being at is it, then okay, I accept that, I'll take that. If it's going somewhere else, okay, I'll accept it. I just feel ready to move on. And then literally as soon as we got home, my first day back, I was fired. I was let go. And that was crazy. That's never happened to me before. And just the timing of everything and like me feeling so dissatisfied and me feeling like I wanted to move on and go on to the next thing, it felt really good to say, whoa, okay, chapter over, chapter done. And it felt really good to, in a weird way, it felt like divine confirmation, because I literally sat in the boat and I was like, God, I'm gonna need you to help me. Like, if this is where you want me to be, then I'll be here willingly, and I'll come back to work and I'll put a smile on my face and I'll know that I'm living out your will. But if there's something else you want from me, I need you to tell me. I need you to show me. I need you to make things happen so that I'm more in alignment with your will. And that's exactly what happened. And so here we are, January. This is a totally new chapter for me in my life, and it feels really good. Of course, it feels very scary, but there are themes that I'll get into that relate to this course, and more specifically this week for the Artist Way, week 8. And I'm just really looking forward to what's next. And frankly, I'm putting all my energy in creatively expressing, creatively living out what I know to be the truth of my destiny, quote unquote. So yeah, here we are. Week 8. Let's get into it. So many good things going on in week 8. Firstly, Miss Julia. She talks about survival, and she talks about the grieving process of artistic losses, which couldn't be more topical in, my life, and especially given the context of what I talked about with my friend passing. Grief has been a big topic lately, and it was my best friend's husband who passed, and she's obviously distraught. And she's been very active in, I guess, spreading awareness and knowledge about the grieving process. And in it, there's been a really great expression that I love, which is, you're not moving on, you're moving forward. And I think that's particularly, it relates very well if you've lost someone in your life and you feel like life is pressuring you to move on, but it isn't moving on. It's moving forward. And I can relate to that in the artistic process, because there are things that you will try to birth artistically that might not come out the way you had envisioned. They don't come out quite right. It's like you love it with all your tender heart and soul, and maybe it just doesn't live and have the life that you were hoping for. And there is a loss to that, Julia describes it as a miscarriage. And yeah, I feel that. Or sometimes your loss is, sometimes there are losses that happen before something is even born, but there are also losses artistically that happen after it's been ushered into the world and it passes of its own accord, or it just gradually, the energy dies off. And I think there's a part of every artist that wants to hold on and that wants to resuscitate, and it's like, no, come back. And sometimes you can do that and it'll work. And sometimes it's just about mourning and moving on. And I feel that especially when it comes to my now former career in marketing, with losing my job, because there was, even though, losing my job, it was a situation that ultimately I know in my highest self, I know it's for my best good. Of course, it's not a nice situation. And I've put a lot of time and energy into that career. I got my degree. I was in an MBA program. I was working and getting all this experience. I've logged a lot of hours in that career. And so there is even a mourning process for that, which, funnily enough, was a path that I considered myself to have been going down that ultimately just wasn't right for me in the end. But I have to sit and mourn that loss and move forward and take everything that I've learned. And it's not like, oh, never going to use marketing again. No, definitely not. But there is a mourning, so we're moving forward, not on. I have so much written in the cliff notes, in the ledger of this chapter, because there's just so much really good stuff. Let me find my notes, sorry. Sometimes as well, artistic losses can come in the form of feedback. She expresses that sometimes other people's expectations of us are losses and can be mourned as losses. And I have a lot to say about that as well, because I recently had an experience where I've been teaching yoga for the past couple of years now, and it's been such an absolute blessing in my life. It's been such an absolute blessing because it's been my creative expression. It's something that I've dedicated myself to, not just as a practitioner, but I've dedicated just about every ounce of my spare time to teaching as well. All the past couple of years, anytime I have spare time, I'm either teaching yoga or taking yoga. So there's a lot of love that goes into it. And I also put a lot of love into my teaching of not only the physical flow of what we're working on, but also the themes and messages and channeling that I try to bring to each class, sometimes better than others. And recently I received some feedback from someone, and before they gave me feedback, I was asking myself, how do I feel about this class? How do I feel like I did? And I felt solace in knowing that my class, my expression was authentic and true to me. So I said, okay, no matter what someone says to me, I know how I feel about myself. I know how I feel about my practice. I wasn't posturing for someone because I knew they were in the room. I wasn't holding myself back. I wasn't acting out of a discomfort or nervousness or anything. I was being very authentic and true to me. And I received some feedback that was not very good. That frankly wasn't very kind. It was helpful as an artist, because sometimes when you create, you're going to meet people who just don't resonate with what you have to say. I think that's going to happen to everyone. Maybe they just don't get it. They don't get your art. Okay. And I think, I don't know, that's kind of what I'm chalking that instance up to, but it's a very real circumstance that will happen. And I know in this person's heart, they weren't looking to be malicious. Part of me thinks you know, and recognizes that there's a grain of truth in the desire to help the situation. However, it left me with a lot of questions and a lot of reflection. One of which was, you know, what am I measuring my craft to? Am I measuring it up to an expectation? Sometimes it's my expectation, right? And that's a lot easier to manage because it's like, oh, well, then I'm just gonna have to work on managing my own expectation, right? Sometimes I have an idea of what I want a class to be or a project to be, and it won't come out like that. And there's a mourning in that. There's an artistic loss in that. And sometimes there's an artistic loss in the experience not being someone else's expectation. And that one was a little harder for me to reconcile because I can't then just change someone else's expectation, right? But what I was able to reflect on was, how did I feel about myself? How did I feel? What was my barometer? What was the measurement for success in this creative expression? And for me, it's really the same as it is for all creative expression. How authentic and true was that expression in the present moment that you expressed it, that it came out? Because we're always ever changing. And of course, now in hindsight, you know, who you are 10 minutes later is like, oh, I would have done it this way. But at the time, I tapped into everything that I was able and capable of tapping into to provide the experience that was authentic to my present self at that moment. And I have to give myself and everyone else credit for that, who shares that. And it also made me question, you know, who am I accepting feedback from? And something that I know I've talked about in other videos as well is gaining more discernment about not just who I receive feedback from, because you're constantly receiving feedback, whether it's in comments or whether it's just in people's facial expressions. Like, we're always receiving feedback, but I'm being more discerning in who I give my mental space to take their feedback as, I really don't know how to explain it, but to take their feedback as something that's important to me. And that's been a journey because frankly, in a lot of times in my life, I would receive feedback from people, even anyone I'd receive feedback from. And I would take it very personally. And I'd be like, oh my God, I can change. I can, you know, oh, there's a problem. I would take it as there's a problem with me and I need to be different to make other people like me, like and appreciate me, to make other people like my art. And within the past year, I've been reflecting on my tendency to do that. And I've noticed, you know what? I'm not interested in accepting feedback from everyone. Are they going to give it? Sure, everyone is a critic. And that's another expression I've been reflecting on a lot as well. Like, everyone is a freaking critic. Everyone has something to say. Even me, you know, sometimes and Lord knows in the past, I've certainly had a lot to say about my opinions about X, Y, and Z. And I'm on my own healing journey with like trying to not do that and trying to just be like, okay, like let's go to neutrality. But essentially, I don't need to accept anyone else's feedback. And you know, I especially don't need to internalize someone else's feedback, someone that I don't respect. And that sounds very harsh, but when I think about when I receive feedback from people, the people who I care more about their feedback, I I would care more about their feedback, or I'd take it more seriously if they were experts in the field. And you know what? I just decided right now, even then, I don't think so. Like, even if I had someone who is like top of the game, you know, expert person, I'm not gonna listen to someone else's criticism. Because there's a really big difference between criticism and teaching that comes from love. And a lot of the time, we don't receive teaching that comes from love. We receive criticism. And that's what Miss Julia is talking about in this chapter, because she talks a lot about teachers and how sometimes teachers who, especially children, when you're young and you have like an artist teacher who is, you know, very impactful for you, and they have something negative to say, or they are critical or coming at you from their own blocked creativity, we as children, and I've experienced this, we will internalize what they say as a reflection of me. Oh, I didn't live up to this, so that means I must be a bad artist. I must be bad because you didn't like it, because you had a crazy expectation. But at the end of the day, how fucked up is that? How absolutely fucked up is that? To like badger, to like literally like belittle someone's inner child like that. It's just crazy. And frankly, it's taken me a while to get to that space, because if you had asked me maybe 10 years ago, I would have loved to just shoot my shit and to been like, oh, you need to do X, Y, Z, blah, 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 blah. Like, who would have just been giving like really harsh criticism because, oh, I'm just being honest. No one has the balls to say it. I'm just being truthful. But no, you're just being a dick. You're just being a fucking asshole. And that's me speaking to myself. And that's me speaking to other people who do that as well. And, you know, may he who has not sinned cast the first stone. So I don't have any place to be judging for it, because I've definitely done it. But that's something that I'm seeking to draw more awareness to in maybe the subtle ways that I do that. Yeah, definitely. Miss Julia, she talks about, man, she has definitely like beef with institutions. Institutions of academia that posture as artists. This is me putting words into her mouth, but this is a theme that I've noticed throughout her chapters. She has a lot to say about academia and the creative process in academia, and how it's very misunderstood in academia. And she even goes so far as to say is, you know, when you are a young artist and the trust between a teacher and a student in artistry is compromised, she refers to it as emotional incest, because you're betraying that trust as a teacher. And something that I reflect on is a lot is that, you know, there are a lot of ways to teach. There are a lot of ways to be a teacher and to promote insight into the world. And a very big way is through love, right? You can teach through love, and you can teach through positivity, and you can teach through positive reinforcement, encouragement. And you can also teach through contrast. Sometimes you meet teachers in your life who teach you very valuable lessons, not because of what they did, being a symbol or a shepherd of, I guess, the kind of life that you want to live, but sometimes they teach you through contrast and how you don't want to be. Sometimes they teach you because they were such a dick that you say, whoa, I never want to be like that. Sometimes they teach you through saying, yeah, you know, they teach you how you don't want to be. And I reflect on that a lot because I recognize in myself that I've been a teacher through contrast during really dark times in my life. And, you know, anytime really, you can always teach through contrast, I guess. But I reflect on that a lot because I ask myself, what kind of a teacher do I want to be? What kind of a teacher, what kind of a world and a legacy am I looking to build? Am I looking to build one that teaches through negativity? Or do I want to build one that teaches through positivity and love and reinforcement and kindness? And the truth is that I want to build the latter. Like, I am more interested in building from love and kindness. And that also includes teaching myself, right? That also includes criticism that's internal, criticizing yourself. Because I think there's a term that's come up recently in recent years, toxic positivity. And I used to kind of believe in this, where it's like, if I'm just constantly telling myself positive things, I'm negating the negative. I'm negating the things that I want to improve on. And I used to kind of think, and I think the general undertone of that expression is, it's toxic positivity because you're not allowing yourself to honor and accept maybe a negative reality that's going on. But I frankly don't no longer believe in toxic positivity because I always want to choose the higher path, even if it isn't accessible to me, even if I'm having a really hard time getting on that path. I want to choose the higher path. And I think the only time people use the expression toxic positivity, I shouldn't say the only time, but a lot of the time, is when they themselves are not in a positive state of mind. And so I don't remember how I got into that tangent, but essentially, be mindful of who you accept criticism from and feedback from, and that includes the parts of yourself that you accept it from. That's a little message to me as someone who's very self-critical. We don't need to listen to that. We don't need to listen to that. Miss Julia, she talks about believing in yourself. She talks about also, well, I guess I'll get into this later, but the cerebralness, when you get too cerebral, too mental, you end up losing your creativity. But most importantly, she talks about believing in yourself. And I just watched Marty Supreme. What a delight. What a delightful movie. Not in the context of or content of what happened or the context of the storyline. My gosh, it was very anxiety ridden, but what a lovely movie. I think Timothy did a great job. Shout out Timothy. But I really am reflective of Marty Supreme in this chapter because, number one, Mr. Supreme, Mr. Mauser, he really believed in himself, like in an unhinged way for sure, but I admire that. Like, the Delulu is the Salulu, and he believed in himself unequivocally. And how powerful is that, especially as someone who has a difficult time with that level of confidence? I'm looking for the right word. with that level of confidence, I don't know if it's confidence or it's self-esteem. I don't know, but he definitely has a lot of confidence about it. And Miss Julia even talks about, how you need to believe in yourself, and it takes a good amount of egoic, what does she say? She calls it, without specific tools and ego strength, many will languish for years in the wake of blows, which are the blows of, your losses, mourning your losses. And there needs to be like a certain amount of delulu that goes into you backing yourself. And I think this is really where I'm getting at in life, is I want to believe in myself unequivocally, not in a delulu sense, because when I hear like delusionally believing in yourself, I think of, I don't know, my mind immediately goes to people who are ego driven and believe in themselves to the point where they're hurting others. There's that's kind of what that evokes for me. But I want to believe in myself, and that I do, and I'd like to bring it out of myself more, but I want to believe in myself in my knowing. In this knowing that I have very deep in my pit, in the pit of my stomach, I have a knowing of what I'm here to do, what I'm here to bring, what I'm here to share, and an ultimate knowing that my purpose is to be a conduit for love, for light, as cheesy as that sounds. Like, that is literally my purpose. And the whole thing that fuels my artistic expression is living up to that. And that's my word, conduit, is I just want to be the vessel through which God's will shines. And I want that to be a loving and positive experience. And I consider myself to be an uplifter. And I feel the times that I feel most upset with myself is when I don't feel like I'm living up to that. And I know that I haven't. And that's my cross, quote unquote, to bear. But, yeah, Marty Supreme, sorry, whoa, tangent. Marty Supreme, he freaking believed in himself, man. And you know what's interesting about Marty Supreme as well, is that in the beginning, he has this unhinged confidence. He's like, I'm gonna win the freaking US table tennis World Cup. He's like, I'm gonna win, I'm gonna take all the marbles. And then, he got a bit too delulu, and he lost. He experienced an artistic loss, and he, instead of using that loss to inspire his practice, to inspire his moving forward, he went down a path of, how do I want to explain it? He just, after that experience, I think it really rattled him, and he went down a path of a lot of deception, where he felt like, I need to manipulate and control situations now, and I need to lie and twist things to be able to move forward and get to the same place to where I can win and achieve the outcome of what I'm looking to achieve. And man, that was such a great movie. But he didn't allow himself to mourn that loss. And even Miss Julia talks about, you need to have these losses turn into energy. Turn it into energy that inspires you and that fuels you moving forward. Because the artist within isn't going to cry at a truth. The artist within is going to say, oh, I know what I need to do now. I know how I can make myself stronger. I know how I can practice better so that the guy's like freaking underhand serve, whatever it was, so that he can do better. That's what happens when an artist receives feedback that is true. And so you have to give yourself that space to mourn that loss and to move forward. And I think ultimately that's something that I recently had with the person that I received feedback from in yoga. Was I was able to, after that experience, say, okay, what is the main message of what is being expressed here? And how can I use that to make stronger classes that are more in alignment with what I'm looking to I'm looking to share with people, and to create more of to create a stronger pathway to others to experience the emotionality as I experience it within me. And yeah, Mr. Marty Supreme, he could have used that. This is when she's talking about using every loss must be viewed as a potential gain, because ultimately these losses are what are going to help you move forward and move through your passions. And sometimes it really sucks when those things happen because it's hurtful, right? It hurts when you experience an artistic loss, but after the dust settles and that there's it's a popping of an energetic bubble sometimes within you. After that bubble pops, it just feels a lot clearer. And I feel like after everything with my job and all of that, I feel just a lot more clear. So allow yourself to mourn. Allow yourself to grieve in everything. Yeah. Miss Julia, she talks about sometimes people, they think, oh, when I'm hit by a roadblock, they think, why me, instead of what's next. They allow it to stop their movement and their progress. And she talks about, she has a director friend who's like, if I can't shoot in, what was it? He's like, if I can't shoot in 35 millimeter, then I'll shoot in 16. And if I can't shoot in 16, then I'll go back to Super 8. And or I'll go back to video, and then I'll go to Super 8. And who's constantly like, what's the backup plan here? And it reminds me of an interview with Rick Rubin and Kendrick Lamar. I think I might have mentioned it before, but one of my favorite interviews, Kendrick Lamar is just talking about how he is the conduit, how he is the channeler. And it just so happened to be that music was the media through which he would channel these messages. And that's something I think about literally all the time, because I think about yoga has been one channel of expression. And right now I'm really looking to open those channels of communication and do it in ways that are more autonomous to me. I don't have to wait and pray and hope that my director gives me another class to be able to do that. I don't have to wait once a week to be able to do that. I'm asking myself, okay, what are all the different ways in which I can channel this creativity and express it? What are all the methods? So it's really cool that she said that about just moving forward, really. Starting small and giving yourself the space to just take one step at a time. When she talks about the product versus the process, this is also where it kind of comes full circle to me with my prior career and the concept of being too cerebral and too mental, because the mental being the artist killer. When we focus on the end result of what we're looking to achieve, i.e., you know, hey, we're looking to have a class, a yoga class, or an experience that everyone loves, that everyone resonates with. Like, yes, that can be a desire, but if we attach ourselves to the product, to the end result, and we don't have fun in the process, then that's where we end up like losing our creativity. And she talks about too how, oh God, what does she say? Creativity occurs in the moment, and in the moment we are timeless. I think I just jumped to a different, I jumped to a different bullet point in my mind. But, but when it comes to the product versus the process, I think about this a lot because when I think about yoga and I'm like, if I'm just doing a class just for an end result, I'm never gonna get it. Like, I'm never gonna be happy and I'm never gonna feel fulfilled because I'm gonna be like, oh, you know, unless I like touch every single soul in the class, I had a bad class. And then I'm not gonna be involved in the process. So me using the barometer of how did I feel during that class? How did I feel like I lived up to myself in that moment? That I think was really important for me to put all my faith and trust into the process. And that's something that I remind myself when I'm creating content, when I'm creating all these other things is, you know, enjoy the process more than the results of the product. Because I feel like in my old career in marketing, that's really what I was doing. I used marketing, and that career path was it was always my plan B. And because I didn't want to, like, I didn't grow up wanting to be a marketer. No. I was like, oh, well, I need a job, and, you know, there's a good paying job, good career path. So I went down that one, and I would ask myself, you know, during my most mentally unhinged phases of life, I'm like, what can I create that starts with a marketing first approach? And it always sucked. It always sucked. And I think what I realized is, you know what? Nothing good ever starts with marketing. Marketing should always be the last step. Because when I say nothing good ever starts with marketing, take that with a grain of salt. But when we become too cerebral on the focus of how can I reach a lot of people before we even know what the product is, or we even have started the process, or we even know why we're creating something. That's why you have people who are like, quote unquote, like music industry plants. Not that I agree with that expression, but that's why people are like, oh, I can see right through that. Because ultimately people can see, they see authenticity. People notice authenticity, and I think that's ultimately what they connect with. And I think marketing should always be last, and why I realized, wow, I just don't think this is the right path for me is because marketing has a lot of creativity to it, but it's always the last step in the creative process. It's never the initial conceptualization of what we're looking to create. It's just the promotion after the fact. And I wouldn't say it's the promotion after the fact, but marketing is always gonna ask, hypothetically, and say, I have something really special that I wanna share with the world. How can I share it with as many people as possible? How can I spread what I wanna share? And if you don't know what you're trying to share first, you can't do that. So that's why I've had this realization, like, marketing is last. Marketing is the last step in everything. And man, I want to be at the forefront of it. And even in Rick Rubin's book, The Creative Act, he talks about that. He talks about how marketing is the last thing that you do after you've created already. And it's just really ironic to me that I guess my alter ego life as a blocked artist, a lot of it was in marketing. And I'm looking to open up my channels And it feels really good to give myself the space to create and not to be worried about the after of the creation. Man, I'm so excited. Like, I can't even begin to explain how excited I am to like be done with that chapter of my life. And I don't think, you know, I really don't care. I don't think I'm going to be looking for jobs in marketing. I'm unemployed right now. And that's been really fun, frankly, because that's never happened to me before. But I don't want to go back. I really want to move forward, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to move forward. Okay. Julia, she wraps up the chapter. We're talking about filling the form, which is taking the steps. Do the work every day to move towards what you want to move towards. Filling the form is just meeting yourself where you're at. It's taking small, consistent steps. It's being present. She even says, people, we get all caught up in our mind. We're like, I've never even posted a TikTok video, but what if I go viral and then what, my whole life is gonna flip upside down, and then I'm gonna have to leave my husband and my job, and they start planning for like this alternate reality that frankly doesn't even exist. And I've been there, done that, haha, I totally get it. And she talks about, she's like, and sometimes we think of that grandiose like result of something, and we allow ourselves to talk ourselves out of it because we're addicted to anxiety. She talks about, as artists too, we're very dramatic and addicted to anxiety, and then we end up using that, not using it, but it ends up being another manifestation of a block. Which I love that, because sometimes I'm like in my mind and I'm like, oh my God, like working myself through a tailspin, and that is just me, you know, acting on blocked energy, really. So how can I evolve past that? How can we move on past that? One step at a time. Right here, right now, where I'm at right now. What can I do right now? And she says, no one is asking you to leap. That's just drama. There's no big leap that's going on, which I've been talking about since day one in these, the anxiety of the leap, right? And the truth of it is that I don't think God asks you to leap. I think God just eventually, one step at a time, leads you to a cliff, and then there's the knowing and the trust within you that is like, God's got me right now, because I wouldn't have been led here unless, I don't know, there was a cloud beneath me to lift me up, to whatever the freaking metaphor you want to use is. But I felt very much about that in my, you know, being let go. I didn't leap. I wasn't like, whoa, let me just, because that was like a year ago. I wanted to quit. I almost rage quit. And I was like, whoa, that me leaping would have been like, come on, God, like do it. Like I'm quitting, no backup plan. But this was like, oh no, this was the end of the fucking road. And God has been, and it also solidified with me, like, no, babe, God has been like letting you know that this isn't right for you. And, you know, I just didn't know where I was going next. I was like, hey, you know, if I need to be going somewhere else, like, let me know. But it didn't show up. And so God eventually led me down a path that was like, okay, this is, you know, this is a cliff. And me in the free, I feel very much like I'm in the free fall right now. And honestly, I just have a lot of faith. I feel like I have so much faith right now. Like the most amount of faith I think I've ever had in my entire life. I just know everything's gonna be okay. I just know that everything is fine. And you know what? If it isn't, what a wild ride. Like, it's been great. It's been real. Like, I would rather go out living true and honestly to myself than to live a long life that's in denial of my true self. That sounds so dramatic. I'm not going anywhere, but that's just where I'm at right now. I am trusting. She talks about here too, like, sometimes people, in order to talk themselves out of something, they'll talk about the odds, right? Oh, like, I really want to go down content creation, and I would really like to build community and strength in content creation and connect with people, like-minded people, and I would like to reach people as well. I have things to say, I have experiences, I have insight, knowings that I really want to share with people and be a conduit, be that channel of those messages. And, you know, I know the odds, but I don't give a fuck right now. Like, I don't care about the odds, because I also know me, and I know, and I have this trusting in myself that, you know what, everything's gonna work out exactly as it's meant to work out. And if that means that something really cool happens, cool. If that means nothing happens, then at least I'm expressing myself. Like, at least I'm living truly and honestly, and all I care about is being that conduit. Because that's me showing up to work every day. And like, literally, God is my employer right now. I'm just saying, okay, what do you want me to do? Like, and I trust and I recognize within myself, like, to be that conduit in big ways, in small ways, just in taking care of, you know, my one-day niece, like, in small ways. It doesn't ever have to be in big ways, but that's what the path is. That's the trust. That's the truth. And then every day, you know, every day I'm just gonna keep building momentum. I'm gonna keep creating content. I'm gonna keep noticing every time that I look at myself in the fucking editing thing in DaVinci and I'm like, oh my God, your acne looks so bad today. Every time I'm like criticizing myself, every time I'm like, you know what, that's not very good. You should probably scratch it. I'm just going to meet that wall head on, and I just need to burst through it every day so that I can allow myself to be a stronger messenger of whatever it is that needs to be shared. Because I know there are things that need to be shared. I know it. She has an exercise called early patternings where you fill in the blanks about, like, you know, some of your trauma. I've done it like about 5 times, I swear. She also talks about doing some daily affirmations. Some of my favorites are, I have a right to be an artist. Creativity is a blessing I accept. My creativity blesses others. My creativity is appreciated. I now share my creativity more openly. I now accept God's helping. I now accept. Excuse me. I now accept God's help unfolding in my life. And one for me that I always reflect on, an affirmation that I'm calling into my life, is my creativity brings not only financial wealth and abundance, but emotional wealth and abundance. My creativity brings in a myriad of abundance, not only into my life, but into others. Because I've had a narrative in my mind that artistry and creativity doesn't pay the bills. And you know what? It does. Like, it does. Creativity fuels not only the world, but it fuels me and it allows abundance to come into my life. And the more I creatively express, the more I'm opening up the pathways to receive that abundance. And I fucking claim that. I claim it. Anyways, babe, love you. I'll see you next week for sure. Bye.